The Israeli envoy to the United States was called to the U.S. State Department for an unscheduled meeting on Tuesday. Ambassador Mike Herzog met with Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, who conveyed the United States' concerns regarding the Knesset's passage of a law that greenlights the reestablishment of evacuated Israeli settlements in the northern West Bank. The two diplomats also discussed the importance of all parties refraining from actions or rhetoric that could further inflame tensions leading into the Ramadan, Passover, and Easter holidays. While the State Department did not characterize Tuesday's meeting as a formal summoning or dressing down of Herzog, it's seen as a rare move by the Biden administration aimed at escalating its protest against the judicial reform's more controversial legislations. Hours earlier, the State Department daily press briefing opened with a lengthy statement condemning the Knesset vote, revoking parts of the Disengagement Law, arguing that the move flew in the face of Israeli commitments to the United States.
Just 2 days ago, Israel reaffirmed its commitment to stop discussion of any new settlements for 4 months and to stop authorization of any outposts for 6 months. Coming at a time of heightened tensions, the legislative changes announced today are particularly provocative and counterproductive to efforts to restore some measures of calm as we head into Ramadan, Passover, and the Easter holidays.
And joining me now is Professor Chuck Frey, former Israeli Deputy National Security Advisor and Senior Fellow at the INSS and Miriam Institute. Thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
The Israeli Foreign Ministry is insisting this meeting wasn't a formal summoning, but it's quite unprecedented for an Israeli envoy to be called on by the State Department, no?
Yes, it's certainly uncommon, and whatever limited consolation people can take from the fact that the U.S. decided not to call it a formal dressing down, I think is quite limited, bordering on the ludicrous. The fact is that the United States is very deeply concerned about what's happening in Israel. First of all, the Knesset revocation of the Disengagement Law really flies in the face, as your reporter was saying. It violates Israel's commitments that we made at the time. And remember when Prime Minister Sharon, I was personally involved in the disengagement process. When Prime Minister Sharon came up with the idea, the first thing he did was to go to Washington to try and get American approval. And the U.S. said at the time that if you want our approval, then you have to go beyond the initial plan, which was for dismantling settlements in Gaza. You have to do something in the West Bank as well to indicate that it's part of the package and that there's a future potential for further future progress in the West Bank. And that's what led to the dismantlement of the 4 West Bank settlements. And in exchange, President Bush provided a truly historic letter in which he recognized that some of the settlements would remain in the blocks. He recognized the demographic realities, and that was a huge achievement that Israel got. Now we're backtracking.
And do you expect the Biden administration to take its reprimanding a step further? The Israeli government is walking back essentially on its promises to the United States when it comes to settlement expansion.
Yes, and well, there are, I think, some understandings that it will be limited for the next few months. But I think the administration is really dismayed both by the West Bank policies and to a certain extent even more so by the judicial changes, reform or whatever you want to call them. We saw the president expressing unprecedented concern and critique of what's happening and saying that reform of this sort must be based on a broad national consensus. I think the administration has made it very clear that it opposes this, is deeply concerned by it, because the fundamental basis for the U.S.-Israeli relationship has always been Israel's vibrant democratic character. And now that is being called into question, and it's a huge problem for the bilateral relationship.
I want to ask you, Hebrew media is reporting that security officials are worried Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich's recent comments on the Palestinians could damage Israel's security ties with Egypt and Jordan specifically. I want to ask you, Egypt plays a huge role as mediator between the Israelis and Palestinians. What could be the repercussions of weakened ties with Egypt?
Well, it can hurt the ties with them. In recent years, as you're saying correctly, they have played a major role in trying to keep a lid on things in Gaza. And we have a long border with Egypt itself, which they keep quiet. And Jordan plays a similar role, keeping things quiet along their long border. We're increasingly part of the Arab world. We have the Abraham Accords. We've been something that we've been trying to reach for decades, and all this has happened in the last few years. And we're risking all of it today by taking measures which are at best controversial in Israel itself. I think we are risking a historic transformation in Israel's regional standing.
Professor Chuck Frey, former Israeli Deputy National Security Advisor and Senior Fellow at the INSS and Miriam Institute, thank you very much for your insight this morning.